This podcast is not an offer to buy or solicitation to sell a security. Any investment involves risk of the loss of some or all principal invested. Past performance is no guarantee of future performance, and speak to your finance and or tax professional prior to investing. Securities offered through Emerson Equity LLC, member FINRA SIPC, only available in states where Emerson Equity LLC is registered. Emerson Equity LLC is not affiliated with any other entities identified in this communication. 1031 risk disclosure. There is no guarantee that any strategy will be successful or achieve investment objectives. Potential for property value loss. All real estate investments have the potential to lose value during the life of the investments. Change of tax status. The income stream and depreciation schedule for any investment property may affect the property owner's income tax bracket and or tax status. An unfavorable tax ruling may cancel deferral of capital gains and result in immediate tax liability. Potential for foreclosure. All financial real estate investments have potential for foreclosure. Illiquidity. Because 1031 exchanges are commonly offered through private placement offerings and are illiquid securities, there is no secondary market for these investments. Reduction or elimination of monthly cash flow distributions. Like any investment in real estate, if a property unexpectedly loses tenants or sustains substantial damage, there is potential for a suspension of cash flow distributions. Impact of fees and expenses. Costs associated with the transaction may impact investors' returns and may outweigh the tax benefits.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is CRE Insight with the SoCal CCIM chapter, where we shine light on extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Welcome to the show, JP. Would you like to introduce yourself?
JP Ledesma, Beacon 1031. It's our sales group. We're part of Emerson Equity. And my specialty is in assisting people with 1031 exchanges and providing them with the up-leg properties. Typically, those properties are in the DST or Delaware Statutory Trust legal entities.
Great. And before Beacon 1031, what is your genesis story? How did you get here?
Well, for many years, I've been interested in real estate and finance, and kind of my past life, I've been on some redevelopment agencies and dealt with land use issues. And then I think it was back in about 2015, I had a client that was looking for a 1031 exchange solution, but she didn't want something that she would have to manage. So at that point, she was 82 years old. She inherited a property, held on to it for a prolonged period of time, wanted to avoid a large capital gain. So that's how I found out about the Delaware Statutory Trust. And then it took me a few years to get licensed and solely focus on this niche.
Great. So in layman's terms, if we could explain DSTs to somebody just totally unaware of what they are, what would you say to them?
Technically, a Delaware Statutory Trust is a legal entity or wrapper that can hold one property or could hold many properties. And because of a Internal Revenue Service ruling, they're considered an investment trust. And that's the reason they qualify for the 1031 exchange. So you're not actually on title on a property in the DST. You're buying into this DST entity. You're becoming what's known a beneficial owner, right? So you're paying to become a beneficiary of this trust. You know exactly what the trust owns, though. So that's the caveat. So it could be one property, and then we have some that are up to DSTs that might have up to 28 or 29 properties in the one legal entity. So what you're buying is an undivided legal interest in the entity. And because of IRS ruling 2004-86, it's considered and taxed the same as if it were a fractional direct ownership. Similar to a tenant in common. However, in my opinion, there are some superior protections for the investors.
And so with fractionalized ownership, what are some of the benefits of being able to own certain properties under the DST model?
Right. Well, certainly the positives are oftentimes you can buy a fraction of a very large investment grade property, typically of better quality than you may be able to obtain on your own. So the largest property we have is valued at approximately $390 million. In that, you can have, in this entity, you can have well over 1,000 investors. So that means for a relatively small amount of money, you get a piece of a very large investment grade property. if the properties are less expensive, you have some diversification. So there's one DST, for example, that has 28 different industrial properties in it. So for as little as $100,000 investment there, you have fractional ownership, essentially, for tax purposes, 28 different industrial properties. And then it allows you, with relatively small amounts of money, to diversify, right? So you can diversify by real estate sector, by market. You can buy properties all over the country. And then there are different companies that put these real estate syndications together. We call them sponsors. And you can, of course, buy from different sponsors.
And what is the sponsor offering, or what is their role in the DST?
Right. Their role is essentially, what they do is they go out and they find a property. They think it's a good investment for one reason or another. Then they pay lawyers to create this legal entity. Their role is to act as the asset manager of the properties and to also be the trustee of the trust. They're the ones that coordinate the monthly distributions, right? So the tenants typically pay monthly, you get paid monthly. And then once a year, you also receive tax statements, right? So it could be like a substitute 1099, sometimes called a grantor's letter.
And so with these sponsors, how do you qualify them, or how do you verify that would be a good sponsor to go with for your clients?
Right. Well, that's a very good question, because we have selling agreements with about 43 different sponsors. Some of them are quite large and some are small. So there's a couple levels of due diligence. So there's kind of the very high level where the sponsors go out and they pay companies, legal firms typically, to provide some background check on them. And that's a very high level sponsors way of vetting the companies, right? Then the next level is really here at the brokerage, where we have our own due diligence people. And at the lowest level, I guess you could say, would be myself and my business partner, Gabe Candia, where we take a little bit more of a real estate perspective on these deals. And the reason is essentially is no matter how big or successful, if you've done hundreds of real estate transactions like these larger sponsors have, not every deal is going to turn out well for one reason or another, right? So there has to be kind of a critical eye in terms of the market, the assumptions that are made in terms of potential rental growth, potential exit. If it's not a triple net, what are their assumptions that they're making about expenses, which is becoming a big issue in a lot of markets.
Right. If I were a potential client of yours, what are the benefits? Like, why would I choose to go from managing property directly to taking on a fractionalized ownership interest?
Well, most of the clients that we have are in the stage of life where they've owned real estate for many years, and they're looking to transition into passive investment and mailbox money as opposed to being active managers in their property, right? And oftentimes they go for what we call sleep well at night investments or swan investments. That's the goal. Essentially, they just want the mailbox money. Now, again, I already mentioned that you can have the opportunity to buy into high quality properties. If you need to have debt replacement, all the debt is already in place on these DSTs if you need it. It's non-recourse. In other words, the person investing in those DSTs, if they have debt there, the only collateral is the property and the entity itself, not the individual investors. It doesn't show up on a credit report or anything of this nature, but they do get the tax benefits of having the debt in place. Beyond that, it also is handy for people that are concerned with estate planning. So with fractional ownership, it's very easy to divide. If you own a piece of 3 or 5 different properties in different Delaware Statutory Trust entities, you can divide that up between any number of heirs upon your death. So those are the major benefits.
Great. And so your client profile, what age are they, and do they go into multiple DSTs more often, or a single one, or are they repeat clients of yours, like going from one DST to another? How does that work?
Both, right? So yes, people will oftentimes go from one DST to another when it sells. So the Delaware Statutory Trust itself is a legal entity, but they don't go on in perpetuity, right? They have limited lives. So average hold time is about 6 years. So when they sell, right, you get a minimum 60 days notice that the property is going to sell. It gives you an opportunity to make plans, maybe do another 1031 exchange. And then the overwhelming majority of people choose to go into another DST. Now, You don't have to, but most people could want to continue to defer the taxes.
So the
And
people that decide to exit out of that DST when it does sell, they would just pay their capital gains tax at that point.
correct. I mean, there are some programs that we work with where you either have to or you can go into a real estate investment trust via what's called a 721 exchange, but that's while that's becoming more popular, it's still, I would say, it's in the minority of cases.
So among your client base, are these like properties that they're selling to cash out of? Are they residential properties, industrial, office, retail? What kind of properties are these?
Lately, it's been mostly residential properties. However, quite a few might be. We had one gentleman that was a shopping center. Sometimes we have people that just have leftover boot they exchange into a triple net property, but the debt situation with adding debt on a triple net property these days, where cash on cash returns are really heavily impacted by debt service. So they might put some money in the DST to help make up for that debt and enhance, go all cash in on a triple net property, right? Sometimes people use me for leftover boot. I've had a few that have used me as a backup, right? So they don't really want to go in DSTs, and they have 45 days to identify their up leg, which is really easy to identify. The problem is identifying, getting control, and doing your due diligence in those 45 days, right? Especially if you have less than $2 million of equity in this marketplace, you really can't buy much. So it kind of is across the board. I've had people sell apartment buildings, strip malls, industrial properties, and then fourplexes, single family residences, all of it.
And so when they're deciding on the type of DST that they want to go into, is it based on their historical experience with a certain product type?
Typically, that usually happens, right? Because people have preconceived notions. And then sometimes people will make decisions that have nothing to do with the financial strength of a property, right? So I have some people that tell me, well, they would never buy in California. Others that tell me they'd never buy in Florida or Texas or, certain sectors. And a lot of times people have comfort levels with certain types of real estate, right? So we just really get down to what the client needs, kind of work out what their goals are and what makes sense. I mean, how much are heirs a consideration? Do they want cash flow, or do they want the heirs to be able to get money right away? Things of that nature. And sometimes people are a little bit more strategic. Like I've had a couple clients that maybe put not all their money in one DST, but a large sum, thinking that what they're going to do is go in the DST. When the DST sells, they're going to use that money to buy a retirement community home in another state, and then convert that from a rental to a primary residence in the future. Right. So it all comes down to strategy. But no matter what due diligence we do, the fact of the matter is that we're human. We can't know every single thing that can go wrong. So it's always best to diversify, right? Especially if someone has a larger sum of money, it'll probably be 3 to 5 DSTs. And then beyond that, once they get into larger sums, we also have the option of doing custom DSTs or land deals, things of this nature that are a little bit more creative.
What are some I guess like standards within the DST world? Because I talked to a few people and they said DSTs don't really exist for multifamily in California because the laws in California. Is that something that's a true statement, or how does that work?
No, it's nothing to do with the laws in California. It just so happens that California tends to have high land value. So, and the reality is when you have an entity, right, or a group between you and the property, you're not going to get 100% of the cash flow. So the cash flow is going to be relatively low compared with what you could obtain elsewhere. So California, especially along the coast, tends to be more of a growth market, right? You're not buying an investment property for the income. You're buying because you think you're going to be able to push rents for several years and you're going to get growth in your equity, right?
Right.
Well, most of the people that we deal with that are investing in DSTs, they're in a different place in life. They've already built up their equity. What they want is to protect their principal typically, and get steady, safe cash flow. So the economics oftentimes don't work. Ironically, there is one DST that's multifamily available right now in Northern California.
Interesting. That's
All right.
That's a really cool perspective on DSTs and how they work. So really cash flow is important, peace of mind. They don't want the calls from the tenant about property management type of issues. Are there any other benefits to a DST that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I could give you a list of several more, but I think we brought home the point. But certainly being able to be a passive investor is huge. And that's what I mean by the, sleep well at night type investment, right? And the other thing is, we like to say, it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's true. When a person gets to a certain age, they really want their return on life, right? They don't want the hassle. They want to travel, spend time with family, or what have you.
So investing in a DST will not only give them peace of mind, but also the freedom to go do the things that they enjoy with their loved ones.
Well, it's a possibility of peace of mind, right? There's things could always go wrong, and you have the same risk as you do with any other real estate. In addition to that, you also have to have the consideration of the sponsor. I mean, it's really the reality of the situation. So I don't want to overstate it, but that's why I say we work with clients. We do the best due diligence we can, and I think we provide superior due diligence. Between myself, my business partner Gabe Candia, and my compliance team, we pretty much visit quite a few of these properties, especially if we have significant money going in these properties. So I've been, visited properties, anywhere from here in California to Colorado to Illinois, New York, Texas. So, to spend the time to do that. Yeah. So typically when it comes to investigating the sponsors, we'll take a much more critical look to a company that's new to the DST or syndication space. And then some of the larger, we have one sponsor that's been syndicating real estate for over 50 years and has other divisions that invest for state pension funds and things of this nature, right? We take a little bit less critical look than we do with someone that's a smaller company with a less track record.
Got it. So what is your onboarding process for new clients? What can they expect when they, step into your office or start getting engaged with you? What's that look like?
Well, typically we engage in terms of education in the very beginning. Once a decision is made, then the onboarding process essentially consists of us asking them for information that's required by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the USA Patriot Act, right? So kind of similar to opening up a bank account, right, in terms of USA Patriot Act. And then we have to ask about their financial investing background and things of this nature. So to answer your question, once someone decides they want to move forward, right, the whole process can take 5 to 6 business days, and they can close once the decision is made to move forward.
What is the most popular type of DST? What is that product category?
I'd say fairly consistently, multifamily has been the most popular category. We're seeing some divergence from that in terms of more people are going for assisted living. Somewhat people are starting to get comfortable with student housing again.
Oh, wow.
Multifamily. And then most recently, I would say industrial has come on fairly strongly in the last couple of years.
Okay.
So it's been much more weighted toward industrial. So, people tend to go for, the hotter sectors, right? Which makes sense. And you don't want to go for sectors that have proven to underperform.
Looking back at your career and your, journey to where you're at now, if you can pinpoint some of your traits or even success skills that have helped you excel in this area, what would they be?
Well, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One is, always try to look out for the interests of the client first as much as possible. And I tend to be a little bit more analytical. So I've found, for example, each one of these DSTs comes along with a private placement memorandum. I've had a few I've come across where they've had mistakes I found. So I'm willing to take a little bit more critical look. And I know the first real estate book I ever read, no one's ever heard of this guy, was a little booklet I bought many years ago by this guy, John T. Reed. I'll never forget the name, but he had a whole section on BS detection, right? Because the fact of the matter is no matter what the product is, if you listen to the company right? They have what they call wholesalers. They're out trying to sell you their product. Well, they're always going to tell you about the positives.
Right.
The brochure is always going to look beautiful, and the financial projections are always going to be rosy, right? So it just comes down to trying to decipher, are those projections anywhere close to an economic reality?
Mm.
And why do we or don't we believe those projections?
Well, I love the fact that you go deep and you do like scrub these offering memorandums. And, you know, looking back, I heard from a fellow board member of the SoCal CCIM chapter, Lauren Coombs, that she had a great experience working with you. And one of the things that she said that really touched my heart was, even if her client does not qualify for a 1031 exchange, that you are willing to help them optimize their next decision. Could you tell us a little bit about that, like what your thinking is in that situation?
Right. So my focus is 1031 exchanges and having people invest in these Delaware Statutory Trusts with that equity.
Mm-hmm.
We still have other products available that help people with tax mitigation. So when you sell a business, you have what's known typically as a 1231 gain, right? So we have products to help offset those types of capital gains. And then if someone has a year where they have very high earned income, there's steps that we can take also with other types of products that would help reduce that tax liability. And it's all unique to the individual. Now, typically when we get into a deeper discussion, I'll loop in a tax professional, but there are a lot of people oftentimes are not aware of. So once I have that discussion with them, then I can offer what I think is a good suggestion. And then we bring in a tax advisor and kind of finish up the strategy from there.
Great. And so most of your client conversations, do they engage your CPA and attorney in their conversations with you?
You know, that's always the recommendation, right? So each person's circumstance is different. Tax issues are different, goals are different, or even on a 1031 exchange, you know, the basis goes with you on your exchange, right? So are you a low-income person with a lot of equity in real estate and you're not overly concerned about the tax implications of this rental income you're going to be getting? Or are you someone that still has a high earned income and taking steps to go into properties that have had cost segregation studies done or will have them done, and leveraging up to get more depreciation? Is that worth a lot to you, right? So a lot of people that are selling the condos or the houses, they're not going to be that sophisticated. But the people that have been long-term real estate investors that are selling apartment complexes, larger properties, they're going to be more interested in those types of conversations.
Got it. Well, I like the fact that you take a holistic approach to their whole situation, and it's just not just the 1031 exchange DST.
We don't ever make the same recommendations to any two people, right? It all comes down to what we believe would achieve their goals in the safest possible manner. And we look at, you know, also what is the potential return on equity. And I have some people that don't, you know, that tell me, hey, I don't have heirs. I don't care. Just put me in the triple nets. You know, like, I don't care about appreciation. Okay. You know, so there's all those discussions. And like I said, also some people have prejudices that have nothing to do with merits of the investment, right?
Right. So your education process starts with the client, you know, when you first meet with them and try and understand their needs and their goals. Does it ever then include their heirs, educating the heirs about what this investment means to them?
Very rarely, actually, do I ever talk to the heirs. I'm trying to think. I think, well, in this past year was probably the first time in a few years I did have a mother come in with her 2 children. But that's, like I said, that's pretty atypical.
So it's really the parents thinking about the succession plan and what they're trying to do with all their real estate investments that make the majority of the decisions.
Yes.
Got it. And if you could look around, and I get inquiries from a lot of different companies doing what you do. What could you say that differentiates Beacon 1031, your partner Gabe? What makes you stand out? What makes you different?
Well, I think there's a couple things, right? So what I like about Emerson Equity, for example, they've been in this private placement market since 2004. Well, Delaware Statutory Trusts are entities that were codified into law in Delaware, and they've been around for decades. It was only since 2004, due to an IRS revenue ruling where the IRS formally recognized these as qualifying for 1031 exchanges. So I think having a kind of a broker, so to speak, that's the industry or an industry leader is quite helpful in many ways. And beyond that, both Gabe and I, were involved in investment real estate before we got into this niche. So we look at this through the eyes of a person in real estate. So a lot of times people in this industry will say that they have real estate experience, but they've never sold real property, but they sold a real estate investment trust, which are securities, right? Which are selling shares of a corporation that buys real estate, which is not real estate, right? So I think that's the biggest difference, right? Most people selling this have never done a real estate transaction, have never owned investment properties, have never done investment property exchanges. So that's where we are quite different.
Got it. And what is your outlook for 2025, which is just around the corner?
I don't expect there to be any great changes. I mean, certainly on the macro outlook, there's all kinds of dangers that could very negatively impact the economy in terms of the threat of wars or significant economic disruptions, right? That would hurt everybody in all real estate, no matter what.
Right.
I expect more of the same. Now, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, we had several years of 100% bonus depreciation. This year into 2024, it's 60% where you can take bonus depreciation, right? For properties that were put into service from the end of 2017, right, to currently. Now, one nice thing is, as Trump has mentioned, is he wants to bring back the 100% bonus depreciation. So that would help in the DST market where they qualify, right? So they're considered exchange properties for tax purposes, and you can take advantage of accelerated and/or bonus depreciation if it's applicable to your situation.
Great. Now, our audience is wide and varied. If there were some young people looking to get into your field of business of DSTs, what kind of advice would you give to them?
What would be really helpful is take the CI 101 because it gives you a very strong basics and it does cover 1031 exchange while it refers to what I know as depreciation as cost recovery, right? Which is fine. Calls like-kind exchanges was really 1031 exchange. But that gives you, I think, the basic building blocks of understanding the whole issue of basis in a property, what's taxable in a non-exchange situation versus what benefit you would have from a 1031 exchange.
Amazing. Well, thank you for making that plug for our SoCal CCIM chapter. That's one of the core courses. We love hosting our CI 101 to 104 students. So thank you.
All right.
And then JP, you're also involved in our chapter as a platinum sponsor, and tell us how that's been for you.
It's been excellent. So it gives me an opportunity, of course, to network with people that are interested in sharpening their real estate skills. So we have people that are, new to commercial real estate to longtime veterans. And I think it's a great venue for people that are interested in working cooperatively with others and wanting to learn and grow.
Great. Now, if people have questions, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to reach you? What's your preferred method of contact? How's that?
Oh, I love phone calls. So So 949 606 9898, or you can go to my Beacon 1031 and have my contact information there.
Great.
Beacon1031.com.
Great. Any final thoughts for our audience?
Again, I think when it comes to commercial brokers, especially, I think DSTs are great in terms of presenting the concept to your clients. And certainly I'm very happy to help people, help them to try and win listings, right? Because oftentimes you have people that highly appreciated property, they don't know what to do next. They're scared of the unknown, right? So you can say, look, this is an option. And oftentimes, depending on the type of property, oftentimes people actually enhance their cash flow, especially if they're going from Southern California to other parts of the country on their exchange. Two, I could talk a little bit and introduce them to the concept of some of the tax benefits. And even if they don't want to be passive real estate investors, maybe they'd be willing to sell if they knew that they had an acceptable backup plan if they weren't able to do the due diligence on a replacement property in that 45-day window, right? And the other thing is sometimes people just use us. I've had this happen a few times, just use us for leftover boot, right? So they sold the property, they bought another via 1031 exchange, had a few $100,000 left over. They don't want to pay taxes on that. They put in the DST.
Got it. And what's like the minimum amount that someone can invest in a DST?
Typically $100,000 is the minimum. So a relatively small amount of money.
And is there a cap? Do sponsors place a cap? Like the amount someone can do for their DST?
Some will place a cap of 25% of the syndication. So if there's $100,000, $100 million of equity, right?
Right.
They might cap one investor at 25 million of equity in the deal because they don't want it to look like a partnership or have the DST challenged as, right? So if it's a partnership, that would not qualify for the 1031 exchange unless you were the whole partnership, right? So in any event, there are caps, but when people get into larger sums like that, we also have several sponsors that we work with that will kind of do custom DSTs or very large properties. No, anytime you have a question about a 1031 exchange, feel free to run the ideas by me. I'm certainly willing to help. And, if I don't have a solution, I'll let you know I don't have a solution for you and hopefully point you in the right direction or on the people that can help you with your client or you or your client's situation.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, JP. This was a very illuminating conversation. I really enjoyed it. I love every time you and I talk. It gets me thinking about different opportunities. So thank you very much for that.
All right. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of CRE Insight. We will catch you in the next episode. Thank you, JP. We really appreciate you as a sponsor, a friend, and a resource. Thank you so much.
All right, Jamie. Thank you.